I went to China in 1984 on a Guggenheim Fellowship, and I went to photograph the landscape of Guilin in Guangxi province because the first paintings I saw of this particular landscape seemed almost surreal and completely imagined, and I actually had to ask my professor why they painted them that way. What almost Dr. Seuss-like mountains, and he said, of course, they're real, and they are limestone formations. And when you actually are confronted with it, and the history of the 2,000 years of people going to paint and write, it's almost intimidating, because how can you bring yourself to sort of describe this area without mentioning them in some ways? So my homage is always to them. I'm not trying to make a Chinese painting, but I'm trying to remember something about the history. I began using the panoramic format in 1982, partially influenced by the paintings I'd seen as a graduate student, but also because of the 19th century photographers that had employed that multiple panel panoramic views of the landscape. And I like its narrative style. It's also cinematic. I used other formats, and I still use those other formats, but I like the panoramic the best. I feel like it's the biggest challenge. You know, I'll photograph in an area and put 5 or 6 together that they're not contiguous. When I was studying Chinese in 1988 at Beijing University, I lived right outside of Shaoyuan, which is actually original part of Yuan in some ways, because it used to, the people that had to go work with the emperor lived in that area, and there were gardens everywhere. And so I lived outside one of the original gardens full of lotus. They were just amazing and luscious, and the leaves so seductive. I had to photograph them. Started photographing the dead ones, or as they're dying, because they seem to be more like the writing, the calligraphy. And originally in Hangzhou in 1995, I was there for a long period of time, and it was raining constantly. And so all of a sudden I had to figure out a way of photographing the lotus or the landscape in this very flat light, and the lotus were what I started looking at more closely. With that camera, walking's fine. I mean, I can carry the weight, but I can only walk a certain distance. I couldn't really go far, far away. So I figured, well, I really want to go way out in the landscape and then climb the mountain. And I saw people with their whole entire family on one bike, plus a pig tied to the front and maybe a chest of drawers on the back. And I thought, well, I can put my camera on the bike. That's no big deal. I do like just sort of gliding through the city and seeing what's happening. I can't, I go towards the light, or I go towards the fog, or I go towards the smoke. I can't describe it, exactly what I'm looking for. So roaming around on the bicycles, for me, is the best way to try to find that thing.